Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eileen Graham. I'm the Policy and Strategy Director here at Treehouse. And today, during our Facebook Live session, we're going to recap some of our successes from the 2021 Washington State Legislative Session, some of the new investments and policies that are going to improve equity for youth in foster care. So if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to post them in the comments and we'll get to as many as we can. I want to turn it over to my other colleague here today. Dawn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am Dawn Rains, Chief Policy and Strategy here at Treehouse. I've been here for 12 years now, and I am, in addition to my professional role, I'm also a former foster parent.
Thanks, Dawn. So we're going to start off with just a general question. So obviously the pandemic has impacted youth in foster care and society as a whole in many ways over the course of the last year. What were some of the biggest factors that Treehouse considered when setting this year's legislative agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I mean, I think the first overall theme was just economic uncertainty. You know, as we went through all of last summer and fall, things were looking very, very dire. And even January, when the session started, the state was still projecting a $2.4 billion deficit over the next couple of years. You know, Treehouse and many of our colleagues were deeply concerned about really big cuts to both the child welfare system and the education system. You know, and Treehouse is about 30% state funded. We rely on contributions from our community for the other 70%. And so not only were we worried about cuts to the systems that impact our young people, we were also worried about potential deep cuts to our own funding that enables us to provide so many supports to our students. So at the same time, we knew about all of the impacts that we were seeing of the pandemic and remote learning on our students. We're really seeing kind of deep disengagement from school. You know, as much as 40% of our students were only somewhat engaged, 9% had completely disengaged. You know, we're also seeing about 44% of our students needing some kind of tutoring and academic remediation. The young adults in our Launch Success program were really among the first to lose their jobs and led to a lot of economic instability for them as young people, you know, so housing, unemployment, food instability for both our young adults and also for many of our caregivers. So we had been advocating with the governor, the Department of Children, Youth and Families for the previous 6 months to really declare a moratorium on exiting young people from extended foster care on their 21st birthday in the midst of a pandemic. We knew we were just exiting kids into homelessness. Then also been advocating with the governor and the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction to target federal COVID relief funds for education on the students who are furthest from educational opportunity and justice. And those students are youth in foster care, youth experiencing homelessness. To be honest, we weren't getting a lot of traction on either front. So that was kind of a big sort of frame of mind as we were entering the session. As you may know, legislative leadership really established 3 kind of core priorities for the session. COVID-19 recovery kind of on every front, whether it be healthcare, economy, education, equity on all fronts was a really big theme of this session. And then climate crisis. I would say there was also kind of a 4th focus on this budget crisis and the possibility for new revenue. So I would say that's the framing. You know, overall, this is just a really weird session. It was completely remote, which offered many challenges, but I think they really came, I have to give the shout out to all the tech staff of the legislature because they did a great job actually managing both the requirements for public hearings as well as, the need for security and all of that. But the thing that was such an important gift is that it really allowed a lot more people to engage in the political process to really make their voices heard. And this session, 67,000 people took part in committee hearings or submitted written testimony or signed in support or in opposition to bills. And that's what we really hope gets sustained as we go forward. So back to the very beginning of January, the things we were really focusing on priority-wise were maintaining critical education funding, for sure, improving transition to adulthood supports, and then addressing many of the inequitable barriers that our students experience.
Absolutely. I love that it was a learning curve for everybody. There's a lot of uncertainty going in, but that there are these key takeaways of things that actually may improve just the how of getting some of these laws passed is really exciting. I know for us and for a lot of our colleagues. If you're just joining us, we're covering some recaps and wins from the 2021 legislative session. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to put them in the comments and we'll get to them as quickly and as many as we can. So Dawn, given all of the uncertainty and urgent needs that young people in care were experiencing, how would you characterize the outcomes from this session?
I mean, historic, incredible, stunning, really. I mean, when we think back to where we thought we might be even 6 months ago, it's just such a stunning difference. The outcomes, both in terms of policy and investments in education, in child welfare, in juvenile rehabilitation needs, really simply incredible. This may be the year that we decided the latest what our ask was going to be in terms of financial support, increasing our financial support at Treehouse for our graduation success work. Within the first couple of weeks of session, usually by the beginning of the session, we've decided what that ask is. We've already been talking to legislators about that need, but everything was evolving so quickly that we really waited quite late. One of our biggest champions, Senator Reuben Carlisle, encouraged us to be bold. For the past several years, 7, I think, Treehouse has been expanding our graduation success program across the state. This year, we're serving about 1,300 students, but we knew there were still about 600 students left to serve, who are really waiting for access to these services. So he really inspired us and agreed to champion our request to ask the legislature to really finish the job, finish that statewide expansion, and they did. We are really, really excited that we will be receiving the state funding that we need, combined with those private dollars to really finish that expansion over these next 2 years. So we're just thrilled. We will receive $4.89 million over the next 2 years that will allow us to complete that statewide expansion. And it's really kind of the culmination of a dream we launched back in 2011, that we had a vision to take this program statewide to serve every eligible youth who would agree to engage with us. And now we have the potential capacity, or we have the ability to build the capacity to do it. So super exciting. Yeah.
No, I was stunned. Took a moment, I think, to process when that final budget came out. The impact that this is going to have for students across the state, and just the testament to the incredible work that our direct service staff do every day with these young people.
Absolutely. And I would just add that many of the requests of our colleagues in the education space and in the child welfare space also ended up getting funded kind of at the full request levels. This is not a usual result. It was really a combination of a stronger economy than was expected, and also the influx of federal COVID relief dollars that allowed the state to make some big investments, many things that we had been hoping for many years.
Definitely. Well, if you have questions as we go, feel free to put in the comments, but for now, we'll just keep going through our legislative priorities and sharing outcomes from that. So Dawn, can you talk a little bit about some of the education supports that we requested from the legislature, both policy and additional funding?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big requests that kind of our primary policy request going into this session was Senate Bill 5184, which was about requiring school districts to appoint a school building point of contact for youth in foster care in every K-12 school in the entire state. So for many years now, we've had a district foster care liaison. This really pushes that down to the school building level where adults actually know kids and can really champion their needs and coordinate resources and supports with organizations like Treehouse and also with the Department of Children, Youth and Families with their social workers, so that we're all working together. And we're super excited to participate in implementing that law in partnership with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and making sure that those school building points of contact get the information, training, and resources that they need to do that well. So that's sort of chalked up to one of our big wins of the session.
Yes.
Another big priority that we had was making sure that all of that, the existing education funding kind of remained protected, but actually what we saw was additional investments in many of the key areas. So you might recall, if you've been following us along for the last couple of years, that we got an expansion of the Passport to Careers program, which really provides post-secondary support for young people who've experienced foster care or homelessness, helps them either complete their post-secondary education or take part in state-approved apprenticeships. And while the state increased eligibility, they didn't increase funding. So this really, they made a big additional investment, almost $9 million over the next 2 years, to make sure that they could meet their obligation that they had created by expanding that eligibility. So we're super excited about that. That's really going to impact many of our launch success students. Thinking, Eileen, we're super excited, of course, that our educational advocacy program remained fully funded. That was a really a critical piece as well. Make sure we're removing those education barriers statewide.
Yeah, in general, I mean, OSPI is having to address a lot of things with COVID. There's a lot of learning loss needs, some remediation, a lot of conversations about mental health, how to address the trauma that everyone, but especially our young people, are experiencing because of COVID. So a lot of investments in those areas. School counselors is another one. We're putting together a big list of all of these really crucial investments that came out from this last session.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question from Ben. Can you talk more about what you anticipate statewide expansion might look like with this big influx of state funds?
Absolutely. Yeah, we, we've been expanding this program with additional legislative investments and additional private dollars raised for many years. We have taken a strategy of going where most of the highest number of students are. So we started in King County. We're in every district there. Our next, went to the kind of the population centers, Tacoma, Spokane, Vancouver, Everett. And so this next expansion is going to take us out into the peninsula for the first time. We're excited about that. Really expand out around Vancouver and Yakima, where we have a small footprint now, but need to get to those school districts around. The other thing is you'll see us make, I think, important investments in expanding our relationships with tribes across the state and making sure that our youth that are both in foster care with the state, but also under tribal jurisdiction, have access to the supports with specialized education specialists, tribal education specialists that come from those communities and know how to provide culturally relevant service. And then also exploring moving into serving our young people who are both impacted by foster care and the juvenile legal system as well. So we're excited about that. The second year of our expansion will really take us out into kind of remote areas where kind of a hybrid in-person and technology-based remote strategy is probably going to have to be used. So we have some innovation work to do to really fully define what that might look like in partnership with school districts. But we're excited to take on the challenge.
I give a shout out to Linda and Judy, both agreeing transformational work, and just thank you for being a CASA. That's a really important role in a young person's life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A little earlier, you talked about how some of our Launch Success participants were among the first to lose their jobs, and how Treehouse was advocating for some moratoriums around ending support for youth in extended foster care. What were some of the wins around that critical transition point from completing or graduating high school and taking that next step into adulthood?
Yeah, we were thrilled that all the funding for extended foster care was protected, and that thanks to some changes in federal regulations and funding, right now, youth do not have to leave extended foster care at age 21. It's been extended to age 22 temporarily to really address the economic recovery that has impacted young people so directly. So we're excited right now that all of our young people can stay in extended foster care through age 22 for a temporary time. So that was a win. That was, I think, part of the result of advocating for all that last 6 months was making sure that those young people were protected in that timeframe. The other thing we're super excited about, something, again, if you've been following along for a couple of years, we have been urging the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to do a better job in planning for adolescent transitions out of foster care. And thanks to Representative Chop, who really, through his advocacy or his priority behind this, the state has allocated one time $1.9 million for DCYF to create and implement a new approach to transition planning, and also really re-envisioning the independent living program. So we're excited to see what that looks like. We're hoping to participate in that process as a stakeholder. We have a lot of thoughts about what our young people need, both in the high school space and in the post-secondary space. So that has been on our agenda for quite some time.
Another big bucket, I think newer that we're publicly talking about, but not new to impacts to youth in foster care, but something we talk about a lot is the foster care to prison pipeline. So before we go into describing some changes that are coming around that, can you explain what that is, and also a phrase that you used earlier, the juvenile legal system?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people don't know that about 40% of the young people who are incarcerated in our state's juvenile rehabilitation system have been in foster care, and 80% of their families have come to the attention of CPS. So there is a very strong correlation between sort of incarceration and foster care. And for many years now, we have been engaged with a group of inmates at the Monroe Correctional Facility. There is a group there called the Concerned Lifers Organization that is intent on making the world a better place, even from their place of sort of incarceration. There's a subgroup of those men that call themselves the state-raised group. And these are a group of men who grew up in foster care for the most part, were, I would say, from hearing their stories, failed by the foster care system, and then failed by the education system, and then failed by the juvenile legal system. And you might sometimes hear that phrase, juvenile justice. But our point of view and their point of view is there's not a lot of justice actually in that system. And that really, this is such a critical time, a critical point in a young person's life where the right kind of intervention and wraparound supports can really change the trajectory of a young person's life. And so we have been partnering with the state-raised group at the Concerned Lifers to really think about how we provide great service that could make that really big difference. So we are excited about some policy interventions or policy changes and investments that the state is making this year that I think will really make a big difference. First of all, right now there is really inadequate behavioral health, mental health therapy, and substance use disorder treatment inside juvenile facilities. This, again, a critical moment for intervention, but they have not had access to the support services that they need. So the state has made an investment of just over $5 million to really improve those outcomes, because we know if we don't shift that trajectory, then our young people are very likely to end up incarcerated as adults. The second thing we're super excited about is that the Department DCYF will receive just over $9 million to create a new juvenile rehabilitation community transition program. So it's basically trying to create a least restrictive option. Incarcerated youth can transition back to their communities once they've served 60% of their sentence. while the department monitors their location and provides intensive wraparound supports that really helps them re-engage in school, re-engage in maybe pursuing career or employment options, and then provides wraparound and therapeutic support so that that young person can make a better transition back to community. So we're excited about that. And then finally, the one thing, sort of really at that intersection of child welfare and education, we can tell you that what happens currently in terms of institutional education, so education supports for those young people who are incarcerated, are wholly inadequate. And that a new bill was passed, House Bill 1295, that establishes new and modified duties for OSPI, for DCYF, for the State Board of Education related to providing that education support inside incarcerating facilities, secure facilities. And then it also continues the work of a work group that is making recommendations to reform the system completely. And those recommendations are due to the legislature in November. So you'll see us championing some of those requests or recommendations as we go forward. So many of our young people are impacted by that juvenile legal system, and what we do in that moment really matters.
Definitely. You mentioned the legislature's focus on equity being instrumental in securing both additional state dollars for youth in care and in making some of these really significant policy changes. So do you share a little bit about other equity wins that happened for our young people this year?
Yeah, absolutely. There's new requirements around diversity, equity, inclusion, standards being wrapped into required cultural competency training at both the K through 12 level and also at the higher ed level. So we're excited about that. Many of our young people are really impacted by both the systemic racism and individual bias that they experience in both the foster care system and the education system. And so we're excited to see that more training and learning is coming to those environments that they spend so much time in. Another thing we're really excited about is that for a long time, our staff has been asking us to champion the needs of our relative caregivers and supports for those relative caregivers and the youth in their homes. While about 45 to 50% of youth in foster care in our state are placed with relatives, which is best practice, that is absolutely the gold standard in child welfare. Only about 12% of relative caregivers choose to go through the process of getting a foster care license. And what that means is that they do not have access to the monthly foster care stipend that they would receive. And so it is sort of a financial penalty on the family and also on that young person. So this allows DCYF to create a new child-specific license for relative caregivers and create a new process that would streamline that licensing process. So hopefully many more of them will be motivated to get licensed and get that monthly foster care stipend. Probably for about 14 years, the child welfare community, advocacy community has been talking about the importance of legal representation in the dependency process for kids, for youth. Every other player in the court system in dependency hearings is represented by an attorney, except for the child. And so we have, along with colleagues, been advocating for this for many years. This investment really reduces the length of time that kids are in foster care. And so this new, there is money and legislation set aside to make sure that every child in the child welfare system over age 8 is provided an attorney in that dependency process. An additional investment that we're excited on that equity front is House Bill 1227. We refer to it as the Keeping Families Together Act. It really raises the standard of removal in an effort to reduce bias in the foster care system. So as many as 65 to 70% of our kids are removed due to neglect. And I would say sort of a middle-class standard of parenting. we would say, and I think best practice would say, that there are other ways to address basic needs, substance use disorder, mental health issues, than separating a child from their family. So this law requires that children and youth only be removed from their homes if it is necessary to prevent imminent physical harm, and requires DCYF to make continuing efforts to place children with their relatives and thus in culturally relevant and appropriate settings. So we're excited about that innovation. And then finally, we're also really happy, didn't even actually know this was on the docket, that DCYF has said it, they received $250,000 to create a language access plan to address equity for immigrant, multilingual providers, caregivers, and families. So I think that will really just improve the equity of services that are provided.
Give a shout out to Bradley. Yes, equity that Treehouse provides in our service, but equity that's really coming alive in some of these statewide changes, which is exciting. Dawn, even in just the last few bills you were describing, I'm hearing a really big focus on youth voice, youth representation, which I know is something that Treehouse we're deeply passionate about. A lot of focus on the core family, like not as much on the birth parent in some of these bills, but on the kinship caregivers and those adults that are already in a young person's life, and really keeping that unit together when possible. Which is,
absolutely.
Yeah.
We're actually even at the federal level kind of moving upstream in terms of focusing more on prevention. For the longest time, a lot of people don't know this, the state gets reimbursed by the federal government for part of the cost of kids being in foster care. But in order to get that reimbursement, they actually have to remove the child from the family. So there's kind of this reverse incentive in terms of funding. And now there's much more of the funding is being focused on the prevention side, the wraparound support side, as opposed to after a child is removed. So we're really excited to see that transition.
If you have any questions, final questions for us, feel free to put them in the comments or reach out directly. We're happy to follow up with anything. Dawn, now that the 2021 session is over, officially ended in April, what comes next, and how can those who are interested stay involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, of course, already the moment the session is over and we sort of look at all the wins and the places we didn't make progress. We're already planning for 2022. We participate in a number of coalitions that are, focused on child welfare, on education, on disrupting the school to prison pipeline, reimagining schools. And so we are busy at work understanding all of the priorities that could come forward, and seeing where that intersects with Treehouse's strategic framework and our intended impact. The other thing is that Treehouse co-leads a project called Project Education Impact with our colleagues at Building Changes who focus on students experiencing homelessness. And this work group made up of legislators, state agencies, organizations like Treehouse statewide. Together, we are charged with improving education outcomes for these two student groups. And this fall, in October, we have a legislative report due that will really, we are due to provide both information and data, as well as our recommendations about what needs to happen over these next 2 years to really improve those education outcomes for our students. So it's an opportunity to have huge input and influence on what happens over the next couple of years. We are in the process of launching a bunch of engagement work with youth, with young adults, with parents, caregivers, state agencies, and our nonprofit colleagues across the state to really make sure that those recommendations are fully informed by the people who are most impacted. So we're excited to get that process rolling and really make sure that those two things, that sort of information coming from all of our systems and advocacy partners, as well as by the people who are impacted by them, sort of show up in those recommendations. And then we'll just be keeping the Treehouse family up to date by our Advocacy Action Center. I hope you've all joined so that you get regular updates on what's happening. I would be remiss if I didn't invite you to an event that we have next week on May 25th. It's a part of a new equity series that we're launching. It's going to be a really compelling conversation about what I would call upending the foster care system as we know it. It's provocative, and would love for you all to join us. So you can find information out about that on our Facebook page or our website.
Well, thank you, Dawn.
Say like one final thing is that all of this progress only happens because of all of you. So many people using their voices to advocate for our young people. And we're just really grateful for your partnership, for your engagement, for your interest. Please reach out to us if you have questions, suggestions, ideas about how we might be able to continue to improve conditions and improve outcomes for our youth. So I just want to say thanks so much. It is really our honor to partner with all of you.
Absolutely. Echo Dawn's gratitude. The work that you do every day, the work that you do with Treehouse during session, and thank you for joining us today. That's all that we have. Thank you for tuning in. Learn more about some upcoming events through our website, and we look forward to keeping you up to date on all of the wonderful work that's going to be coming for 2022. Thanks, everybody.